So it looks like we have some definitive updates about what the NXT General Manager William Regal's two game-changing announcements are going to be tonight on NXT on the USA Network. Now, WWE NXT General Manager William Regal is scheduled to make two major announcements on tonight's edition of NXT on the USA Network, and now Justin Barrasso of Sports Illustrated has revealed what those game-changing announcements will be about. So we did a video talking about this yesterday, but now we pretty much have confirmation as to where this is all going. Now, Regal's first game-changing announcement will be the creation of the new NXT Women's Tag Team Championships, as we spoke about yesterday. Regal's second announcement that will, quote, change the landscape of NXT will be centered around the two-night NXT TakeOver event that is scheduled for WrestleMania 37 week in early April, which is also speculated, and once again, which we discussed yesterday too. Now, it was recently revealed that the WWE Network has an NXT TakeOver event scheduled for Thursday, April 8th, which is the Thursday before Night 1 of WrestleMania 37 on Saturday, April 10. It was then revealed that WWE officials had discussed the first ever two-night TakeOver event, with Night 1 airing on the USA Network in the regular Wednesday night time slots, while Night 2 would air that Thursday on the WWE Network. The new report from Sports Illustrated confirms TakeOver Night 1 will air live on the USA Network, while TakeOver Night 2 will air exclusively on Peacock/the WWE Network. Now, there had been some speculation on William Regal announcing that NXT was going to be moving to Tuesday nights, ending the Wednesday night wars with AEW Dynamite, but it looks like that may come at a later date if the show even moves off Wednesdays. It doesn't look like that's going to happen for the foreseeable future anyway. So, of course, NXT is tonight, and once we have some confirmation as to what this announcement is actually going to be, we will actually speak about it in length probably tomorrow. We'll do a breakdown video tomorrow talking about the news, what I think about it, opinions on it, your opinions on it, and the reaction to it in general. My opinion really hasn't changed that much when it comes to both of those things. Are they game-changing? I think the Women's Tag Team Championship certainly might change the landscape of NXT in terms of you've got a new championship to compete for if you're a tag team and if you're a female in NXT, so that's significant. When it comes to a two-day takeover, is that really going to change things in NXT? Is that really going to make a difference in NXT? Of course, the answer is no. The answer is absolutely no. And my point yesterday, and my point really hasn't changed that much really about it in the last 24 hours or so, is what's the point? What's the rationale here? I think WWE have to walk a really fine line at this point. Look, WrestleMania, I'm all for it being a two-night event, and I wish it would stick to being a two-night event. It doesn't look like, for the time being anyway, that that's going to be the case. When it comes to WrestleMania 38 next year in Arlington, Texas, it looks like we're going back to having a one-day event on a Sunday that lasts like 8 hours in length and is very difficult to watch. I prefer it to be a two-night event. I prefer it to be on a Saturday and a Sunday. I prefer to turn WrestleMania from a one-night event into a festival, essentially. And it's kind of already been transitioning to that for the last few years when you talk about WrestleMania Access, the Hall of Fame, the NXT TakeOver show before WrestleMania, the Raws and SmackDowns after WrestleMania. It kind of turned into this sort of this festival that lasted a week. But the only thing I would say about that is WWE, as I mentioned, has to walk a really fine line. That yes, it can be a festival that lasts a week, but also you don't want to burn out the audience. You certainly don't want to burn out the audience, and there is a potential to do that right now. Because you look at that week, that is going to be a week that's very heavy on wrestling. And as a wrestling fan and a wrestling channel, of course, that's not a bad thing in the slightest, but you do need to be careful. Even the most hardcore of pro wrestling fans get tired of pro wrestling if it's on all the time. Look at that week. Look at what that week's going to consist of. You've got Raw on Monday, right? Then you've got nothing potentially on Tuesday. I mean, actually, isn't the Hall of Fame? I think the Hall of Fame is going to be on Tuesday. So you've got Raw on Monday, Hall of Fame on Tuesday, TakeOver Night 1 on Wednesday, TakeOver Night 2 on Thursday, SmackDown on Friday, probably something, well, then you've got WrestleMania on the Saturday and WrestleMania on the Sunday. You're talking about 7 straight days of pro wrestling. Then, of course, we're going back to Raw on the Monday as well. So we've got like 8 straight days of pro wrestling, 8 straight days of WWE. That's important there as well, because I think that's the thing you have to consider there, is that you hear these stories talking about WWE employees and the production staff, and Kevin Owens recently did a video thanking everyone that works behind the scenes for WWE. I mean, as a fan, you just expect to turn on whether it's the WWE Network or pay-per-view or the USA Network or Fox or whatever, you expect just to turn on and the show to be there. But there's so much work that goes into that, not just the creative side of things, not the performers, but the production staff and the people that put the ring up and help create the sets and the lighting people, the pyro people, all that kind of stuff. Those are the real unsung heroes of WWE. They're the true MVPs of the company, and they really don't get spoken about a lot. And you always hear that story. When we're living in a normal world, you always hear that story around the time of WrestleMania that whilst it is, from a fan's point of view, something that we love and enjoy because it's the biggest event of the year and you have these great moments and these great matches and all this kind of stuff and you get so excited for WrestleMania, from the production staff point of view, it's a very long week and it's a very tough week. And I'm sure, it's their job and I'm sure they're compensated well for doing so, but to put on essentially 8 straight days of live content, that is going to be, from a production point of view, from the production staff of setting up sets and just directing a live show, producing a live show, that has got to be so draining. I mean, so draining and so difficult to do, because you've got Raw, then you've got the Hall of Fame, then you've got TakeOver 1, TakeOver 2, then you've got SmackDown, then you've got WrestleMania Night 1, then you've got WrestleMania Night 2, then you've got Raw. 8 straight days of live television. That is, from a directing and a producing point of view, that is insane. I mean, that is insane. I do not envy everyone that has to put that on, because Vince McMahon, there are these stories, aren't there, when it comes to Vince McMahon, that when it comes to WrestleMania week, he essentially just doesn't sleep. Now, I know he's not going to be involved in the NXT product or anything like that, but still, that is beyond intense. And I do wonder about, is it needed? Do we need a 2-day takeover? I don't think we do. I think as pro wrestling fans, yes, we get excited, and that's our week of wrestling, and we get really excited about all of the wrestling that we're going to see and all that kind of stuff. But you can have too much of anything. There's too much of anything. Too much of a good thing becomes a bad thing, and that would be my concern there. I think. I just don't know if it's necessarily needed. Now, it's a great opportunity for all of the people on NXT, and I'm sure that week they'll be looking to beat Dynamite in the ratings. Will they defeat Dynamite in the key demographic? Maybe. I think they might beat them in total viewership that week because it's WrestleMania week, but I don't know. I really just don't know if it's really needed to have a 2-day takeover. I'll watch it. We'll do a watch along here on the channel for it. That's the point of the channel. It's about engaging in fan opinion and everyone sharing their opinion. I really, when I see these stories about this and I see that, NXT, they're gonna have a 2-day takeover to rival WrestleMania, it's like, it's a lot of content. It's a lot of content. And I just think, is it needed? Is it just, to me, I look at that and my initial reaction is WWE just wanted to fill an extra day. They wanted to say, for 8 days straight, we're going to be producing television, and don't you worry, you're not going to have to move, and you're going to get your WWE fix for 8 days straight. And they looked at that Thursday and went, what can we put on there Thursday? Let's just put NXT TakeOver. Let's stretch it across 2 days. Okay, again, we'll watch it, but is it really needed? My concern from a WWE point of view would be that come WrestleMania on Saturday and Sunday, you might be like, I've been watching wrestling for 6-7 days at this point. I'm a little bit tired of it. It's difficult to get yourself up and hyped. That's just the case. And if I was a WWE superstar on night 2 of WrestleMania, that would be my concern of being like, this has been a long week, and that might be a worry there. Now, when it comes to the Women's Tag Team Championships, as I mentioned, it certainly does change the landscape for NXT. There's no doubt it changes the landscape for NXT because you've got more titles to compete for. As I mentioned yesterday, it's just more evidence and fact that NXT is back to what it was before it moved on to the USA Network in 2019. It is a completely separate entity from Raw and SmackDown once again. There is no longer this discussion of NXT being the equivalent to Raw or SmackDown. There's no longer this discussion of NXT being the main roster or anything like that. It's back to being developmental. It's back to being a separate entity that just so happens to fall under the WWE umbrella. And we kind of been getting those messages for a while, not so much from reports that we've seen online or social media or anything like that, but from WWE television. If you watch WWE television and you look at the way that any former NXT star is booked when they move from NXT to Raw or SmackDown, you would know that NXT is not the equivalent to Raw or SmackDown. If NXT was the equivalent to Raw or SmackDown, NXT would be involved in the WWE draft, NXT would be involved in Survivor Series last year, NXT would be involved in WrestleMania this year. If NXT was a legitimate third brand on the level of Raw or SmackDown, they would be involved in the same way that Raw and SmackDown are, and they're not. And every time an NXT superstar gets moved to Raw or SmackDown, they get changed. What they did in NXT really doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter in the eyes of Vince McMahon. It doesn't matter if a superstar is really popular in NXT and has their gimmick completely honed in perfectly and can make a lot of money on Raw or SmackDown doing the exact same gimmick, having the exact same ring music and entrance gear and everything, you name it. Vince McMahon will change it because he doesn't think it's the equivalent to Raw or SmackDown. And that just goes to show that NXT, they can try and hype it up and brand it any way they like it. It's developmental. And has it become maybe a little bit something more than that? Well, maybe. Maybe it's not. Maybe developmental's harsh now. It's kind of like it's like an indie brand at this point. You know, it's not developmental, but it's not Raw or SmackDown, and it's kind of. Then I suppose it has a bit of an identity crisis, and maybe that's been part of the problem with NXT since they've been competing with AEW on the Wednesday Night Wars. Is I've seen quite a few people say that NXT really feels like it's lost its identity. When NXT was on the WWE Network and it was a 1-hour show and they had the takeovers and all that kind of stuff, you knew what NXT was. Yes, it was developmental, but it was this underground sort of different indie promotion. And now it kind of feels like it's not developmental, but it's not an indie promotion anymore because it's on network, because it's on cable television every Wednesday night and it's 2 hours in prime time. But it's not the main roster, but it's trying to be the main roster sometimes. And, it feels like WWE Light on some occasions. I don't know. Partially, that's part of the problem when it comes to NXT. And maybe they're trying to get that back by separating themselves from Raw or SmackDown. I don't know. As far as the Women's Tag Team Championships, as I mentioned, it's just another example that NXT is completely separate to Raw or SmackDown. I don't see the necessity for it, considering you have Women's Tag Team Championships in WWE, and part of the point is that you can go across all three brands with those championships, Raw, SmackDown, and NXT. And some of the best Women's Tag Team Championships matches with those titles has been when they've come to NXT in the first place. Nevertheless, it just goes to show, as I mentioned, that NXT is not on the level of Raw and SmackDown in the eyes of the WWE officials. So the positive you could look at it, as I mentioned before, is that maybe having Women's Tag Team Championships in NXT will help cultivate more female tag teams to come through NXT, which will then, they will eventually land on the main roster and compete for the Women's Tag Team Championships on Raw or SmackDown. So eventually, you will actually start to seed that division and actually have female tag teams competing on Raw or SmackDown as legitimate female tag teams, not single stars that have been put together and then suddenly they're a great tag team or anything like that lack tag team psychology. You're going to actually have established female tag teams that have similar entrance gear, entrance music, tag team maneuvers, tag team finishes, all that kind of stuff. It just seemed like a back arsewards way of doing it, because why not just establish the Women's Tag Team Championships and have them compete on all brands? Why do you have to establish another championship in NXT to eventually get to a point where your Women's Tag Team Championships in WWE actually mean something? It just feels like a really long way of doing it. Personally, if I'm going to introduce another championship to the women's division in NXT, I'd rather it be a mid-card female championship. That feels like that's what's really missing in WWE and NXT in general. We've got Women's Tag Team Championships. They should be defended across all three brands. Introduce a Women's Mid-Card Championship that can also be defended across all three brands. Because that's part of the problem now, is as your women's roster is expanding, as your women's roster is growing, there's only a certain amount of championships there. And not everyone can compete for the World Championship. We've seen that when it comes to male wrestling for years. And some of the biggest stars in WWE and professional wrestling history have really elevated themselves, got to the next level when they've had a mid-card championship, whether it is the Intercontinental Championship with Shawn Michaels, whether it is John Cena and the United States Championship. So many stars have elevated and boosted themselves into the main event scene by holding a mid-card championship. And for me, for me, that's really what I think the women's division in WWE actually needs right now. They don't need more tag team championships. They need a mid-card championship. So I would have preferred that NXT added that in, but that doesn't look like it's going to be the case. We've got women's tag team championships and a 2-day takeover. That's the two announcements. Now, I know some people thought it was going to be NXT moving to Tuesdays, as we spoke about yesterday. I still do think eventually NXT will do it. I think NXT officials want to do it, and when I say NXT officials, I mean Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Matt Bloom, those people that are really involved there in NXT. I think USA Network probably want to do it as well, because better viewership, better ratings equals more money, more advertising revenue for the network and for NXT for that matter. It makes NXT a more valuable commodity. I think the main person that doesn't want to do it is Vince McMahon. And again, this is part of the problem of NXT kind of losing their identity over the course of the last couple of years, is that NXT is arguably at this point one of the biggest and most elaborate ways to take viewers out of AEW and off AEW Dynamite. That's the purpose of NXT right now. NXT main purpose, its sole purpose at the moment, is to take viewers away from AEW, and in the process you might create a couple of new stars and people might get hot. That's what NXT's purpose is now. Gone are the days of NXT being a farm or a system to create new stars, cultivate new stars, and get people ready for the main roster. Right now NXT is on Wednesday nights on the USA Network for one reason, and that's to ensure that AEW Dynamite doesn't succeed and doesn't regularly get over 1 million live viewers on TNT. That's the whole reason. Because WWE, and I say WWE, Vince McMahon is terrified at this point that if AEW Dynamite starts to get over 1 million live viewers every single week on TNT, and that 1 million turns into 1.2, it turns into 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6. If they're getting 1.6 million live viewers on TNT, and I know it's quite a jump considering that they're getting like 800, 900,000 or something like that at the moment, but if they had no competition on a Wednesday, who's to say? Who's to say they can't get to 1.6 numbers, 1.6 territories? Because if they do, then they're starting to reach Raw's record low. And then once they're starting to get into that start of arena, then suddenly you never know. They could be equaling Monday Night Raw on the USA Network on Mondays, and they can start getting the same ratings as them. They can start getting the same viewership as them. And suddenly, if that's the case, then the USA Network are well within their rights to go to WWE and go, don't we pay you like $1 billion for 5 years because you're delivering this great show on Monday nights, and yet this new promotion that's only been around for 18 months and TNT are paying far less for, they're getting the same amount of viewers and a stronger demographic rating on a Wednesday night. Why are we paying you all this money? So it's fundamental, frankly, it's fundamental that WWE continue to take viewers away from AEW on a Wednesday night in the mind of Vince McMahon. Now, in the eyes of the fans and in the eyes of the wrestlers and both promotions, you would think that they would have him on different nights so both promotions can succeed, so NXT can succeed, so NXT can have the most viewers possible, the strongest demographic rating possible, and actually succeed as a brand. Vince McMahon doesn't see it like that. He thinks hurting the competition is the only way to succeed, not actually focusing on your own product and improving your own product. Is about destroying the competition's product, which, a bit like the NXT Women's Tag Team Championship, seems a bit of a backwards way of succeeding. But that's the situation right now when it comes to WWE and NXT. So there you go. That's the latest news when it comes to this announcement. These are two game-changing, earth-shattering announcements that they're going to deliver on NXT tonight. Women's Tag Team Championships and a 2-day takeover for WrestleMania weekend. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on these two announcements tonight on NXT? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, NXT, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.